Friend of the show, David Pakman, appeared on the Piers Morgan Uncensored show, and wow, did the sparks fly. I'm looking forward to playing these clips. You can even see in the B-roll that we just had up how heated things got. But I thought David handled it absolutely flawlessly. And because I just went on earlier this week, when I heard David was going to go on, I was really interested to see how much you have this big decision to make. Do you confront Piers head on whenever so much of his show has become so MAGA? Or do you focus on the other panelists? Sometimes you have no option given the question Piers asked. And David did decide he was going to face off with Piers head on. And this first clip is on the subject of trans athletes. And the best quote from this whole thing was Piers Morgan goes, "Do you think you know better?" to David. And David goes, "I do know better, and I'm going to tell you," which is great. Here we go.
Defensible. They lack basic common sense. What do you say to that?
I'm struggling to think that you're taking this any more seriously than as something that might generate clicks on YouTube, Piers.
Wow, you don't think that's serious?
Hold on, Piers, I can't even get a sentence out.
What, you don't think it's serious?
Hold on a second. The vast majority of those instances in the UN report are outside the United States and have nothing to do with the president or vice president of the United States at its face. And
this is talking about a report that was brought up by Piers from the UN, tracking across the world how many trans athletes have achieved medals that would have otherwise gone to cis athletes.
Secondly, I would challenge you to tell me the quotes that Biden or Harris have put forward wherein they have weighed in on how sports leagues should be handling these decisions. But 92% of that study is not even in the U.S. So I don't even know why you're bringing this up.
What's that got to do with the principle of the principle?
I'm sorry?
What's that got to do with the principle?
Well, the principle is you're saying Kamala Harris and Biden have come out in support of this.
They do. They support policies which actively protect. They support policies that protect transgender athletes performing in women's sport. And I think that is madness. You're saying, well, because most of these things in this UN report were outside of America, it doesn't matter. It does matter.
What I'm saying, it's a completely contrived issue that almost no one cares about in every single opinion poll.
Wow. You see, I think that's incredibly deluded. People do care about it. They care about the integrity of women's sport.
It just doesn't show up in any opinion poll as a primary issue. Not top 10, not top 20.
Out of interest, do you think...
They care about it, but it doesn't show up in a single poll.
What's your view? Do you think it's fair?
I think that it depends on the sport, and I think we need to talk about this for probably 90 minutes to really have a productive conversation.
Really? So when you saw the Paris Olympics and you saw 2 gold medal winners in women's boxing who actually were born with biological male chromosomes, you think that's right?
That is not the truth as far as I understand it. Really? I don't know who you're talking about. If you can name them, then maybe we can get into more detail.
Well, you know what I'm talking about. It was well publicized.
Well, tell me. Tell me who you're talking about.
I can't remember their exact names. There were 2 gold medals.
And here is where Piers starts getting upset. You're going to see the mood changes because Piers thinks that David is needlessly provoking him by saying, well, name the people. The reason that David's asking that over and over is because if Piers can name it, then Pakman would be able to accurately say, oh, that's, and now of course I'm blanking, but I pulled this up, Amani Khalif. And if that's who Piers is talking about, then David, you'll see, will bring up what debunks the idea that Piers is perpetuating here. And I'll address the trans athlete's general point in a second here, but that's why he wants to know, because if he's talking about a different boxer, David doesn't want to be on the record saying, no, that person wasn't trans. But if you are talking about Amani Khalif, which it sounded like even David was also blanking on the last name, then he would be able to correctly say that was debunked. But Piers thinks that he's going, if you can't name it, your point doesn't stand, which is not what was happening. And from here on out, you can see Piers sort of snaps.
Medal winners. Well, I can find them now if it helps.
Oh, by the way, before watching the rest of this clip, please do click the subscribe button if you haven't already. We are working to cross 1 million subscribers. Thank you to every one of you who has already subscribed.
I can't remember their exact names. There were 2 gold medal winners. Well, I can find them now if it helps. I don't know why the names matter.
The one who was the source of a lot of viral articles was born a woman, always lived as a woman, and always competed as a woman. I'm sorry?
What was her name?
Imani something.
All right, so you don't know either. So don't be quite so patronizing if you don't know either. But the truth is...
Well, you're bringing it up, Piers. See, here's the thing. Hold on a second, Piers. Hold on a second. You do this all the time, Piers. You bring something up. And then you evaluate your guest's opinion as to how much it matters. You brought it up. If it doesn't actually matter, don't bring it up.
No, just to be clear, you were haranguing me for not remembering the name. I said the name's irrelevant. What's relevant is whether the gold medal winners have biological male chromosomes when they're getting into a boxing ring
they do not.
and punching women in the face so hard that one of the women competitors, a female, quit after 45 seconds.
Yes,
because she'd never been hit that hard.
There is nothing to the story that the boxer that prevailed was ever a man.
Wow.
Just nothing.
And yet you know
nothing.
that
there's no evidence of it. It was a viral right-wing story based on...
And then before the last part plays, just to jump in, what you saw there, Piers said, well, you don't know either, so stop patronizing me. The point that David's making is a really good one, which is, but you brought up this topic. The person, we don't know what you're going to ask us. It's totally understandable that David wouldn't remember Imani Khalif's full name, but Piers, if you're going to build an argument that then you're asking David to respond to, and if you name the name of the boxer you're talking about, he'd be able to say, oh, that's the one that is inaccurately being described as trans, by the way, then of course it's more on you to remember that name than him. But it gets even more fiery. Here we go.
Wow. Just nothing.
And yet you know
nothing.
that
There's no evidence of it. It was a viral right-wing story based on nothing.
Hang on. You know that boxer was banned from the World Championships precisely because there is evidence. You know that, right?
Yes. Do you know the details of that, Piers? Do you know? Tell the full story. Go ahead. Tell the full story.
That boxer was banned, along with the other one, from the World Championships because it has been reported that they tested positive for male chromosomes, right? If you know better, tell me.
That's not the full... I do know better, and I will tell you. That was done by a Russian lab who had an interest in disqualifying her because it jeopardized the undefeated record of a Russian boxer. It's just, that's all they have, and it's totally debunked. Piers, I thought you were better than this,
It's not debunked, and you'll regret saying that because it's true. Let me go to Kevin.
And David never got asked another question for the rest of that panel. I'll go back to earlier when he did get asked a different question. But on this topic, first of all, hilarious to hear Piers going, you're going to regret saying that. You're going to regret you ever said such a thing, David Pakman. But if you go fact check what David was saying, he's correct. Imani Khalif is a woman and is not transgender and has always been a woman and has never been a man. Never transitioned. But what's at the center of the confusion, I guess, for those who aren't blatantly lying and are genuinely confused about this story, there is this differences in sex development, DSDs, and this causes abnormalities. And this is a part of what I've told you before that's a little bit more nuanced about the whole trans athlete discussion than sometimes right-wingers want to believe that it is. Because to enforce rules that many leagues have to ensure fairness, you're testing for sex characteristics. And those are actually more complicated in some people than a lot of MAGA folks, I think, believe them to be. So in the case of Imani Khalif, the DSDs for someone who has been born and lived her whole life as a woman became the kernel that created this trans athlete freak out over her when she's not a trans athlete at all. And it was a lot of credit to David for having that story and the details of it in the back of his head, because it allowed for a really good demonstration of how the outrage machine can not only be blowing things out of proportion, but often just misleading people about them altogether. Does that mean there aren't any trans athletes? No, of course not. And that's where you get to when David says, I'd need 90 minutes to really walk through this. It's because when you're talking about different levels and different leagues and different types of sports, it really is more nuanced how to test. What are you testing for? In the case of a trans person who for a super long time has been transitioning and you can determine them to not have any fairness discrepancy with their fellow competitors, is that person also in the right winger's mind removed altogether? super young sports, etc. And what you're seeing is a effort to convince people that there's something going on in the world that's not really. And so when David says you're sort of misrepresenting the Biden-Harris stance on this, it's because they're not seeking to prevent leagues, high-level leagues, from regulating their leagues to make sure they're fair. And often that's done through different types of tests determining characteristics that would impact fairness. And sometimes that process is more nuanced than MAGA thinks it is. Imani Khalif's a perfect example of how their outrage mind can be a little bit bended. But no, it's not true that leagues don't have the autonomy to regulate themselves to make sure it's fair. And the laws that have been implemented, I'm pretty sure an executive order that was signed by Biden, actually seek to prevent the sort of red state rave, again, I keep using that term, outrage fuel type laws that are targeting trans people, but doesn't prevent implementation of policies to make sure on this topic, because we all understand how it can impact fairness in certain competitive sports, to make sure people are in a fair environment. And I think this is the best example of an issue that, number one, gets blown out of proportion, which MAGA has to do so that you won't focus on other issues that impact more people's lives. But number two is actually something without screaming at each other, we could come to a compassionate and fair solution to across the different instances where it's relevant, if we could all just be level-headed and nuanced. But instead, honestly, some people on both sides, but definitely lately, MAGA's outrage machine seeks to freak people out over sometimes completely fabricated stories instead of just talking about solutions. Then we get to this. Piers Morgan, as you saw when I went on, is so enamored. He got the hat for Trump's McDonald's stunt, and he wanted David to answer for it. Don't you think that it was just the best thing any politician has ever done?
Here's what I would say before I let you respond. The reaction to Trump going to McDonald's was fascinating to watch from here across the pond, because I can't think of a smarter stunt, frankly, given all the furore over whether Kamala ever did actually work at McDonald's. And honestly, from everything I've read, I don't think she did, because absolutely no one can remember her ever being there. But putting that to one side, he goes there. And
okay, nope, got to jump in already. This is so Trumpian. What is happening to Piers Morgan? He's just getting full. I'm a hardcore MAGA guy now. This is the steps that we've had on the Kamala McDonald story. Just like any normal person, she casually mentioned, oh yeah, and when I was younger, I was in college and I worked at a McDonald's briefly. And it's crazy to think that myself as a student who wasn't supporting a family worked there. And some people who have families are trying to support their families with those wages and the hard work that goes into it. And that gave me an extra appreciation for the need to make sure people are being paid properly in positions like that one. And then she moves on with her life and she keeps getting on to other things. And MAGA goes, it's a lie. And then the next day, without us ever reacting to it, they go, see, she couldn't provide any proof that it was true. I haven't seen a single person. I haven't seen a single interview with anyone who has said she worked with Kamala, acting as if this has been something that we're investigating or that Kamala is desperately trying to go get proof of. You just brought it up and within a moment started saying you haven't seen any proof of someone who's worked with her or someone she served, which, by the way, wasn't this in the 80s? That's a crazy thing to go find. But also, no one was looking for it. Right-wing publications have just been echoing Trump saying it's a lie. No one has said we investigated, as even the New York Post or something, and talked to people who also say they worked there at this time and they don't have any memory. None of that's happened. When Piers says he hasn't seen anyone, it's because no one's been asking anyone to go substantiate it until now, and then you're preemptively jumping to his lie. Crazy.
And he does this stunt. But it's, McDonald's is such an iconic piece of Americana. It's the kind of all-inclusive place where everyone can afford to go there. Pretty much.
He said the same thing during my debate. It's just so, Trump's just associating himself with something that everyone loves. Isn't that so genius? so he can go lie about Kamala? No, that's not genius. Yeah, McDonald's is omnipresent in sort of American culture. And also the stunt was silly.
Anyone could end up running a franchise if you work hard enough and you get a bit of luck and a fair wind behind you. And there he is in his hatch, having fries and fries, handing out packages. And yet all I saw from the left was a lot of scorn and mockery, as if somehow him doing this was something to be laughed at. I did not see it that way. I thought this was really smart politics by Trump. And actually what the Democrats should have done was just very quickly move on and find something better to talk about, rather than looking like they think this is somehow all rather demeaning, because that's not how regular Americans would have seen it. Discuss.
Yeah, listen, I mean, I spoke about this 5 minutes on Monday, and I've moved on. So I agree with you. I mean, I'm only talking about it now because you brought it up. I don't think it was as brilliant as maybe you're suggesting. You know, that they closed down a store and hurt that store financially on that day in terms of sales. And Trump, at the end of the day, saw it as something to help him. If he had gone there, well, hold on a second. I'm one sentence in. If he had gone there and said, I put on the apron, I did the fry-o-later, and now I recognize that a $7.25 minimum wage, which has been the same almost 20 years, isn't going to cut it. That would have been really interesting and shown he cares about someone other than himself. Instead, it was about rehearsed drive-through and wearing the apron and pretending
David, here's
to know what's going on.
I'm going to jump in.
And it's Kamala Harris who said, I support a $15 an hour minimum wage.
David, are you familiar with the phrase clutching at straws? I hope that.
I'm sorry, you glitched. What's the phrase?
Does the phrase clutching at straws cross the pond in a way that you understand?
Piers, you brought this topic up.
What I'm saying is, you saying the only way it could work would be if Trump banged on about the minimum wage. You're missing the point. I mean, let me bring in. I'll bring back Kevin here, because you're
on the panel. I brought up. Excuse me. You know what? We're gonna make this a long segment. Let me. Let me not play my clip. I brought up that, you know, Trump called for termination of the Constitution. He says that Pence should be able to do something that now, if Kamala were able to do that same thing, then she would be allowed to not certify Trump's victory. And then often, after trying to get that point out, Piers will go, "Yeah, but let's get back to the important thing: Trump at McDonald's," or something to that effect. Where you're thinking, that's the thing you're gonna cut me off so that you can go get to. And same thing here with David. He made a really fair point, and it's always, no, you don't get the point. You liberals are focusing so much on how you hate this, and you shouldn't, because it was great. So now tell me how great it is. And if you try to introduce any rationality to it, saying, listen, I agree it was a good photo shoot, a lot of people are going to like that imagery. And also, I'm not going to allow that to distract from the most important things facing us days before an election. And for you to go, you're missing the point. The point that we should be talking about for hours and hours on this show is just how sexy it was. It was so sexy and amazing, and I'm salivating over it. It's weird. Great job to David, trying to keep the segment under 20 minutes. Let me know what you thought in the comments.